I'm Jeff Sonnenfeld. If we had a chance to meet before, if we did, I'm still Jeff Sonnenfeld. I'm a senior associate dean and a professor here of leadership studies and run our Yale Chief Executive Leadership Institute. But all that I've just said is the least important thing you're going to hear in the next near hour. Is in fact, we have an extraordinary opportunity where we're quite fortunate for several reasons. Of course, we're fortunate to snag you and to pull you away from your lunches. And we're also fortunate to be able to see you without masks on, since we're handling this safely through Zoom technology. We recently had Eric Yuan, the founder and current CEO of Zoom, with us and gave him an award. And he admitted he himself gets a little zoomed out with 17 Zoom meetings a day, that sometimes there can be too many. And I'm glad that we have so many in-person sessions here in school that we can return to Zoom without feeling the tedium, because this is an extraordinary opportunity for three additional reasons. First, we have a guest who is one of course, on a very, very short list, like a handful of the most admired and revered global financiers, entrepreneurs, and experts in consumer products, and across an array of industries we'll talk about, and also in bridging some important commerce, not only between 180 countries where he reaches, but also in particular throughout Latin America and the US and Europe, and how he manages to be in constant motion between those three major foci. Secondly, we're very fortunate because despite the extraordinary glittering accomplishments that I'm sure all of you know about, but I have to get you a few highlights anyway, he never courts stage, the spotlight. You don't see him out there looking for opportunities to get on CNBC or CNN or Fox or whomever. He's not out there racing with self-promotional materials and all the hagiographies you see out there. That he is frustratingly humble. So we're extraordinarily lucky to have him with us in one of his rare appearances. A friend of mine who is now the former dean at the Harvard Business School did a terrific interview with him, which will be the second best discussion with him after our discussion, of course, today. But it's a very good one. If there's some areas where he shared the stage with his friend and partner Warren Buffett, that if anybody is frustrated when we close today, you might turn to that one as well as a follow-up. But a third reason why we're so fortunate to have our distinguished guest today is that Jorge Paulo Lemann is willing to talk about a topic that rarely comes up in business school, rarely comes up in the business media, rarely comes up in general media. In our world, whether or not it's from the Apprentice or Benjamin Franklin's Poor Richard's Almanac, or wherever you look, we're focused on onwards and upwards and success spirals, and how it seems to be that as an MBA or about to step on a conveyor belt, and many of you leaving school and thinking you have to make the right career choice, there's a belief that somehow we focus on celebrating success only. We don't really showcase setbacks and mistakes. And in fact, resilience from adversity is so important that, to our delight and amazement, that Mr. Lemann, Jorge Paulo, is going to talk about making mistakes. And what I learned from these lessons in leadership through adversity. Rather than a formal speech, our plan was to have a little bit of a conversation, but just to make sure you recognize, if anybody doesn't appreciate, that we have of course, the co-founder of the private equity firm 3G Partners, and he's orchestrated some of the biggest deals in history. Interests in Anheuser-Busch, InBev, the world's largest brewer, Restaurant Brands International, Burger King, and he's a hugely successful financier, but he's also teamed up with Warren Buffett to create Kraft Heinz through a merger. We'll talk about the ups and downs of some of these exciting opportunities. He is right now landed, I don't know if it's back home because so much of his career was in Brazil, but just to have the best possible connection, he's not up in the air, but he's just landed, having been in 3 countries in about the last 3 hours. at least almost 3 different continents in the last day and a half. He is, I think, in Switzerland with us today. And that's almost like welcoming him home, because he's the son of a Swiss businessman, but he was actually born in Rio and graduated, even though he's a really nice guy, from Harvard University. But we can forgive that. And it was an economics major. He says he was a bit of a slacker as a student. We can ask about that. I don't believe that for a second when you remember about his career a little bit. He'd become a journalist and becoming a distinguished business columnist for major Rio newspaper before moving on to work in brokerages. And then, just to add some dimensions to an already fascinating life, thought he'd play a little bit of tennis and has become quite a star as the 5-time Brazilian national champion, and played the Davis Cup twice, representing his home country, and also once Switzerland, where he maintains a dual citizenship. He brought a brokerage called Garantia, using a Goldman Sachs partnership model as his inspiration, which turned out to be Brazil's premier investment bank. Some partners that he set up business with that from that made some very large investments that actually led to takeover of a major retail store chain that is now among Brazil's largest retailers. They also, 7 years later, moved into the beer industry and put together quite a dynamo, as you know, with Brahma and making it eventually Ambev, and then ultimately AB InBev. They've sold out some of their businesses to other partners. We can move into the whole 3G relationship and the Warren Buffett relationship when we get started. But rather than give you more conversation coming just from one voice, which is me talking about our guest directly, and if we would, everybody, please welcome, however you can, of course, applaud by hitting the right button, our guest, Jorge Paulo Lemann. So thank you and welcome. And Jorge, I was wondering if you don't mind me starting with the question about career choice. As we're looking at a theme having to do with learning from mistakes, MBAs in the last 42 years that I've been teaching them anyway, yes, I'm that old, is they're often looking to keep options open, is a watchword, a mantra, an expression that comes back, and get quite anxious as the next season approaches. If they didn't take iBanking consulting deals already by now, then they're looking at a whole array of other options and quite anxious about making the right choice. What's your any thought about, as you've actually reinvented yourself a few times over, was it mistakes to try the things that you tried earlier, from tennis to journalism and things?
Well, first, thank you for the introduction. And I, like anybody who's 20 or in their early 20s, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I came back to Brazil after college. I graduated when I was 20, so very early. And I graduated and went to work in an investment bank. That was interesting because it gave me an opportunity to see many different things. After working for 1 year in Brazil, I decided to work in Switzerland for some time to get more experience with international markets and like that. And I got a job at the Credit Suisse. And it was a very boring job. They didn't really have a trainee program or like that. And after I was working 6 months, somebody suggested that I play the national tennis tournament, and I did that, and then I won that to everybody's surprise, and so then the Swiss Tennis Federation asked if I would like to play Davis Cup for Switzerland and play for Switzerland. So I was 21 then, and that sounded more interesting than working in a boring bank. And so I called up the bank and said I was leaving, and I played tennis for a year, played the circuit, and I played Wimbledon and Roland Garros, and played Davis Cup for Switzerland. I wasn't a great player, quite frankly, but I sort of survived for 1 year, and enough to know that that wasn't what I really wanted to do. And then I went back to Brazil and joined a whole bunch of Ivy Leaguers, uh, Harvard, Yale, Princeton guys who had set up a finance company. And I thought Ivy Leaguers were the greatest, and Harvard Business School guys uh, were were terrific. There was, and we would do very well. We went broke after 3 years. Everybody was sort of the same. Nobody wanted to take care of the back office. Everybody wanted to do deals, sell things. But so that was a big lesson. So here I was, 26 and broke, and having to start again. So that's I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and it took me another 5 years, quite frankly, to get going and starting my own brokerage house and really hitting a solid track of development. So there were lots of ups and downs. Going broke was a horrible experience, and I thought I was pretty good. Found out I wasn't that good, and learned a lot from the mistakes. I think having been a tennis player, I had learned that you don't always win. You lose sometimes, and if you lose, you gotta think things over, figure out how you're going to do it better next time. And that's how my life has sort of been all the time, always evolving a little bit to something new, something maybe bigger, and trying to learn from my mistakes.
That is fascinating. If we went into no additional topics, we could fill the remaining time just drilling down on those early career moves, which we won't do, except we have to spend a little time on them. Is, of course, with tennis, you have nobody else to blame but for yourself when the ball gets smacked and goes in the wrong location. That sense of responsibility that comes with that, instead of the finger pointing blame game. But I wonder, as you made those early geographic, industry and professional choices, how much of it, if you were to juggle between the Harvard connections, as you were talking about your school connections, and I must admit, in a reckless indiscretion of youth, I had spent 18 years myself behind enemy lines up at Harvard, and have spoken to the Harvard business, the Harvard Club of Sao Paulo, but also spoken to the Yale Club of Brazil as well, and found them both equally enthusiastic groups. So they're a great group to work with. But you have a network of friends in an era we talk so much about social networks. We also have experienced mentors of people who can bring you advice and wisdom, having been there before. Then we also have just your own disposition as to what's going to be a good fit for you. What led you to make the different choices? Was it the support advice of other mentors primarily? Was it this social academic network? As we love to hear that for any alums that are on the call, especially, and hopefully everybody on this call becomes an alum, as you will be. That's so valuable. But there's also the role of your own temperament and the role of wise advisors, mentors, and coaches. How would you evaluate the contributions or sheer serendipity by just accidental discovery of different opportunities?
I think in my case, my father died when I was 13, so I didn't have a father figure to really guide me in terms of business or like that. And my mother was very important. She didn't know business, but she was an ambitious person and wanted me to do well. So that helped. I didn't have that many mentors when I went to college and right after college, quite frankly. But and the people I met at the college didn't really help very much. But once I got going in business, uh, I had been to the States, and and I thought the States was way ahead of Brazil in terms of managing and like that. So anything I did, I tried to learn from how they did it in the States. I tried to pick up talent, bring people over, tried to hire people who had already worked in the US. That helped me a lot. Uh, so when I was 31, I bought a seat in the Rio de Janeiro Stock Exchange, and I planned to be a stockbroker. Uh, and that was 1971. After I bought the seat at the what was to be the highest price ever paid for a seat during many years, the stock market collapsed some 70%. So what what I was what I wanted to do didn't work out, and then an enormous opportunity came. The Brazilian central bank wanted to develop a national bond market, and I thought, this was a good opportunity for somebody who wanted to trade in financial markets and like that. And so I transferred all my efforts from being a stockbroker into becoming a bond trader. And I went to the States, visited all the bond traders, learned how they operated and like that. And after 6 years, we had transformed what was called Garantia, which was a stockbroker, into the Brazil's largest bond trader and like that. So, having been educated in the US and like that, now that gave me an opportunity to come very close to Goldman Sachs. We were very close to Goldman Sachs. So I learned a lot about their partnership spirit. I learned about how they hire people and how they remunerate people. And so that helped a lot. And then later on, when we bought a retail company, I once again said, I'm going to go to the States and learn how they do it. And I wrote about 7 letters to the top CEOs of US retail companies, and only 2 responded. One said, oh, yeah, maybe, come by, maybe. And Sam Walton said, come by anytime, come and visit, and we'll teach you everything we can. So I went up to the States, and I went up to the States many times and actually lived at his home, etc. And would get up with him at 5 o'clock to meet the suppliers and things like that, and travel all around the country with him, visiting stores. And so, I'm a big believer in mentorship and learning from others. I actually wish I had gotten the chance to improve my education by doing an MBA or like that. And I actually thought about it, but I never had the time to get around. There was so much going on all the time and so much action going on that I simply didn't have the time to get an MBA or do an MBA, etc.
Well, we can see how we love that endorsement, but just between us, despite that endorsement, it doesn't seem to have hampered your career terribly to have not gotten it. But osmotically, I'm sure you picked up a lot of MBA knowledge as you went. Now, as you talked about that early setback and the derailment at age 26, having lost your dad a little more than a decade before that, you had dealt with some of life's adversity, but not having had a lot of mentors around you. What got you through that tough period? Because a lot of us, do experience a derailment. We don't talk about it as you're willing to do, but as to how to regroup your resources, how to build and learn from it. And you said that your mom was obviously very important. Any thoughts about rebounding from that?
Yeah, well, I think my mom was important, but however you look at me, I'm a competitive person. I like competition. I don't dislike. I love competing. Most people don't really like competing. I love competing competing at anything. And so I always, anything I did, I wanted to be as good as possible. I worked hard at it, and I always had a lot of grit, maybe you can call it, or wanting to do well. So uh, so I think that helped, and that pulled me through. Even if things didn't work out, I kept going and wanted to try again, and would try again, and try to do things better and learn. So I think that's been the most important characteristic. I don't think I'm the most intelligent guy or very intelligent, but like that. But just getting out there and trying, that's that's where I feel good. Trying things, and mostly physically active. Also, I like that, and that's how I feel good, and that's what pulled me through.
Jeff, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I was just on mute there, is that the idea of physically challenging yourself, but also exploring new paths. There's some really good tips and suggestions for us from that. But then you also didn't take on a linear career at that point either. That the guarantee of partnership and all was very important at a stage, but then you decided to sell it. How did you decide to make those moves, as well as moving into the different industries? What was it about retail and beverages that drew you, and how you decided?
Well, I loved the trading and markets, and that was a lot of fun for many years. But we accumulated more cash than the business needed, our financial trading business. And I didn't want to give it to the partners, because if I gave it to the partners of Garantia, they would all go off and want to do something on their own or think about investing the money. So I decided I would invest the spare cash that we had in other things and in businesses that we could grow for the long term. So our first attempt was, we bought a very, at that point it had 70 retail stores in Brazil. It was started by some Americans that went through Rio in the 1930s during Carnival, and they were going to start a retail business in Argentina, and liked Carnival so much that they stayed in Rio, and they set up a company called Lojas Americanas. And it was a nice retail store, and a lot of shareholders, no controlling shareholder. And it had about $100 million worth of real estate. And it was being traded on the market for something like $20 billion or something. So I'm going to buy this and try to run it better. And if I can't run it, I will sell the real estate. I should be okay. So that was, this outfit had about 16,000 employees at that point. So we went in and we bought it, and then we tried to run it. That's when I went up to visit Sam Walton and like that, and learned more about retailing. And we did a reasonable job. And well, the company now has over 2,000 retail stores in Brazil, and is one of Brazil's large internet retailers and like that. But what it really did for us was that it gave us the confidence to buy a bigger company that we really didn't know that much about, and to run it. We gained confidence that we could do this. And so actually 5 years after we bought the retail company, an opportunity came up to buy one of Brazil's big breweries. And even though we didn't know the brewery business very well, I knew Brazil is hot weather, young population, so a lot of beer drinkers, and this company was really not well run. I thought we could run it better. So So we again decided to plug down the previous deal. We had plugged down something like 14 million to get control of the company. In this one, we had to plunk down about $60 million, which was, maybe 1/3 of our net worth in the brokerage business then. But, and then the rest is sort of history. And then we ran that much better, made money. We bought another companies in South America and eventually ended merging with the Belgians and bought Anheuser-Busch. And so that's, that's the way it went. But so we moved from trading in financial markets, which were nice and attractive, but we thought we could do bigger things and do bigger things on a global basis. Trying to run a global financial business from Brazil is not a good idea, probably. With all the ups and downs in Brazil. So, and at one point we merged with the second largest beer company in Brazil. And then we were very big by Brazil standards, and we had to tackle the world. And so that's when we went out, joined with the Belgians, and went for Anheuser-Busch, etc. A lot of stories in between, but so, and then at some point, all these other things became very big, and the brokerage business and the investment banking became small, and so it was time to sell it and really try to build the beer business into the biggest in the world, which is what we did.
You did, and it is an extraordinary collection of brands. I think any fair-minded person would say they surely are the many of the best brands out there, both some of the craft breweries as well as some of the really large regional ones and a lot of the international ones. I happened to have had the good fortune here at Yale. We had your senior leadership team and your CEO of AB InBev here for a program just the very week of the initial attempt at the Grupo Modelo merger for Corona. As fate would have it, one of my colleagues was head of the U.S. Antitrust Department's chief economist for them, and she was not favorable to the idea, so it had to be reworked before the deal went through. Was there anything in learning about how size can work against you and antitrust issues, whether or not domestically or internationally? Because ultimately, obviously, the Corona went through and the SAB Miller merger later went through, but it took some finesse.
Yes, we made a mistake in terms of the purchase of Modelo and Corona, in the sense that in order for that deal to go through, the U.S. antitrust organ obliged us to sell the Corona part in the U.S., all the marketing of Corona in the U.S. And Mexican beer has been the fastest growing category of beer in the U.S. So that was taken away from us. Looking back, we should have negotiated to keep that brand and sell one of the other brands, quite frankly, which became sort of boring brands in the US, such as even Budweiser became a boring brand, etc. So we were stuck with the boring brands, and we let go of what became the hottest brand in the US. So that was a mistake we made, but it happened. We weren't experienced enough to sort of fight the US antitrust. We said, okay, we'll just agree and move on and like that. But looking backwards, we should have negotiated a bit better than we did. So but that's history. And so we kept going, and that's it.
Well, we have such serious, sober students that they surely wouldn't necessarily have any experts on the call. about the 25 different Budweiser beverages out there, not to mention Beck's and Stella Artois, and all the great leaders out there. But if anybody hasn't tried Goose Island yet, you've really missed out. It's my favorite of your whole portfolio, but it's an extraordinary array of great brands, even if it took some learning along the way. But then moving into other areas in the packaged goods area, it's never been easy. When you look at the meiosis and mitosis of Nestle, how it's come and gone, and how they've rebounded. But Nestle's gone through a lot of life stages, just like whatever Cadbury is. It's been chopped up in a lot of different ways, and General Foods and General Mills, but in particular, the meiosis and mitosis of Kraft and Mondelez and Heinz is something very close to you. If you were just between us, and I think we can trust these people, of course, to tell us candidly. If you would, is there anything you would have done differently in going into that Heinz deal with the revered mutual friend of ours, Warren Buffett?
The Heinz deal was very good. Heinz ketchup is a wonderful product. I mean, it sells well all over the world. It's dominant, so it's very good. So the Heinz deal was very good, and the other products they had was very good. When we decided we should merge Kraft with Heinz, we were under the impression that we could really do well, that we could leverage up Kraft Heinz, and based on the leverage we could get, we could also improve the products on the Kraft side, and this would be a very good deal. It didn't quite turn as well as we expected. What happened was some of the flaws we had in our system became apparent. We were very good at buying things, very good at borrowing money, leveraging ourselves up, very good operationally, but not very good at marketing or being consumer-centric or developing new products. That's something that was not part of we believed in training most of our people in-house. We have big trainee systems in our companies. And this is very good culture-wise, that people think the same way and like that. But that began to hurt us in these later years, both in the brewery and at Kraft Heinz, in the sense that we didn't have enough people who were savvy enough on marketing or developing new products, or even in terms of AI and and a more modern internet world, etc. So we are catching up in those fields of marketing, innovation, and using the information we have on our clients and how to approach them and like that. And part of the reason we're late there is that we believe so much in our trainee system that everybody was the same. And we had few outsiders coming into our system like that. And that was a mistake, quite frankly. So for your students, previously, I believe as many people as you had coming from your trainee system was best. Now I believe you should have at least 20% of the people working with you coming from the outside regularly, and making sure that you have that. Otherwise, you only have all the same people and they all think the same way. And when you have to adapt in this ever-changing world, which is changing very fast, you're not ready for it unless you are ready to bring in people from the outside who are more adept at a changing world and like that. So
You know, Jorge, we, as you know, are recording this. Everything you said, I think surely to all the students and absolutely to me, it's so priceless that they're standalone articles in themselves. Your riff right there on getting the right balance. As we talk so much about the loyalty to a culture, but how you can become insular and not fresh or miss out on expertise. That balancing act, we need to send you the transcript for that alone for you to put your name on an article just on what you just extemporaneously commented on that piece of the puzzle. As you were, and also spoken like a tennis champ, you didn't blame others for it. There are other people in this industry who are friends that have blamed the difficulty of fickle, changing consumer tastes, a changed generational interest in different types of nutrition and products and things that is hard to keep up with. But instead, you said we really need to look internally, enterprise level decisions we've made, and not to blame disruptions in the sector for what the challenges have been.
I can give you an example of what happened to us. It may help your students to have a specific example.
Love that.
About 4 years ago, or 3 years ago, we had a problem at Kraft Heinz, a management problem, and we weren't really doing very well. So in a state of emergency, we had to bring in a new CEO. And at the same time that this new CEO came in, we knew this new CEO quite well. He had worked at ABI, so it's not somebody we didn't know, but we had to bring him in. And he was one of the few people in our organizations which was very marketing oriented and had a marketing background like that. And he looked at the top 50 guys at Kraft Heinz. And he said, we're never going to make it with these guys. And he actually substituted 25 people of the top 50 guys there. And I said, oh my God, this is not going to work. These are guys who have never worked with us. They weren't brought up in our trainee system. But he was very good. He made very good choices of people that he hired in the market. He got them to work together. And Kraft Heinz is a much better company now with all these outsiders, which I was very worried about and which we were forced to do. It's we had to do it. Otherwise, the people who were there simply were too much from our system, which wasn't right. So that changed my view entirely of needing outside people also. And you have to keep the culture that you have, but bringing in some outsiders is good also. So now we are doing more of that.
It is so hard to wrestle with that. It is. Thomas Jefferson had once asked, how do we keep the revolution forever young? And it was a notion keeping that vitality. It often meant bringing in some fresh faces, but we worry how we lose the values of the culture that made us great without becoming insular or complacent. In just a moment, I want to turn to questions that people may have, as we're so fortunate to have the actual faces that we actually also can have audio contact with them. So instead of me stealing the credit for fantastic questions, which I have gotten in through text and emails, and I'm happy to read them, but we could also get to the students live. I would just like to ask about one more arena, and that is, I keep sipping from a little Pepsi here secretly, but you've been very close to, of course, the Pepsi-Cola company and PepsiCo in Brazil and throughout Latin America, and Coke, but especially with Pepsi. And I think even Carlos Brito, who'd been your CEO of AB InBev, actually practically shares a backyard here in Greenwich with Indra Nui, our SOM, Yale SOM, Yale School of Management alum, as the head of Pepsi. She had pioneered something very early about performance with purpose, that doing good is not antithetical to doing well. It's something that speaks very much to the core values of our school. You too have been concerned about social impact, and in a way where you're trying to have impact despite your humility, to still in the here and now. we talk about Rockefeller and Carnegie and some of these great legends of a past century. Their philanthropy came after they were no longer with us. They came in foundations that were in their final moments or posthumously. That you're looking at all the causes you could turn to in the here and now as you're with us, so that you actually can be a decision maker of all the things that are there in terms of social inequity challenges in Brazil, or climate change concerns globally and in Brazil that you have focused on, but especially vaccine and pandemic issues are obviously here we are on this Zoom call. I was wondering, how do you choose between the various compelling, noble causes that you can take your resources and your time to invest in them? How did you make the choices, and how are they working out? And then I promise we'll turn to students for questions.
My first priority has always been Brazil, and in terms of trying to help it and improve it in general. And basically the route I have chosen to try to help Brazil is improve education. And I have a foundation which basically invests in improving teaching, invests in increasing the connectivity of the public schools, helps local governors improve their education system in the various states. There is one very successful city in Brazil called Sobral, the Northeast, which for some reason has had the best record of public school systems in Brazil. So I hired the ex-mayor there who introduced the system, and we are now introducing the Sobral education system in 50 small cities throughout Brazil. And small cities because it's much easier to introduce a system in a smaller city where the mayor wants to introduce it. And this is going terrific. The schools we are backing are testing much better in the national exams and like that. And so we're at 50 schools, 50 other cities, and we will expand that. And working with the government is, you have to work with the government if you want to increase education in Brazil. But, this system, I don't have to work with the government. I just work with the local mayors. If they want it, they're great. We'll help them, and they love it. And so I'm very enthusiastic about spreading this out through Brazil. I have given 3,000 scholarships to Brazilians wanting to study abroad in the last 30 years. And lately I've given many scholarships to people who want to come back to public service, about the last 10 years only, and there's about 500 of these, of which 70 are working in government already, and maybe 7 or 8 are congressmen now. So, and I don't pick people who are from the right or from the left, or I don't pick them politically. I just want good people, pragmatic people that will work with one another like that. So this is taking place too. So this, so my priority is mostly Brazil and education, which I think is the most difficult thing to improve. You can fix inflation, you can fix other things, but education, unless you work at it for a long time, you won't improve it. And I'm trying to help out. I'm just a little drop in the bucket though, but I'm trying to help. Now, in terms of picking other things, at the beginning of the pandemic, I got a call from the Gates Foundation, from Bill, and suggesting that we test the AstraZeneca vaccine in Brazil. So, we don't know much about vaccines. We don't know much about medicine, quite frankly, but it seems so obvious that, we could help just by getting these tests going and like that. And in climate change, I'm not an expert, but I'm a friend of Hank Paulson, who's very connected with climate change these days and saving forests and like that. And So we've tried to help out a little bit there. But our big focus is really education in Brazil and getting Brazilians involved with things that can really change the country and make it a lot better.
Oh, well, fantastic. You know, Ed, we actually have a student on the call who's worked with you on some of your foundations. But as a matter of fact, with you telling us and reminding us that your priorities are Brazil first, I should model that and going to students turn to a Brazilian student. Anna, can you hear me okay? And I don't mean to ambush you with a cold call because I'm not even grading you in class right now. But Anna is one of the heads of the Association of Hispanic and Latin American Students, and I think one of two Brazilians in the class right now, right? You and your husband, right?
Yes, thank you, Professor. Hi, George. I'm Emma from Brazil. Great to see you speaking. I really love it. I actually have sort of a follow-up question to what you were just saying now, like regard being just a drop in the whole ocean in like a big bucket. How can like businesses be incentivized to invest more in the society? This is like one thing like that's very recurrent in our conversations at Yale. So it's something we, not just me, but I'm pretty sure a lot of my colleagues are interested.
I think it is happening in Brazil. You know, I notice businessmen are much more interested in education themes than they were 20 years ago or even 10 years ago. And you have people like Natura who are very interested in education also. You have the people from Global TV who are helping a lot. Yeah, my partners, Beto Sicupira and Marcel, my business partners who are investing heavily in education. So it's coming along. And, I think people realize that unless we improve education overall, Brazil is not going to make it, not going to be competitive in the coming years. So I think people are more conscious. Obviously, it would be very good if the government did a better job in terms of education. Now, in a country where in the last 10 years we've probably had 12 education ministers, it's a problem. I mean, for instance, when we work with government, there's constant changes, constant new ideas, and it's hard to keep things going and like that. So that has been a problem. It has been a problem in Brazil in general, constant change of people in government, and everybody comes in, wants new politically minded people rather than pragmatic people who are going to get the job done and like that. And so that's a problem. But as long as we keep trying, but there are a lot more people now interested in education and doing philanthropic work in relation to it. So I think it's improving.
That's great. It's Paula Parnes is the student here at Yale who worked with you at Fundacio Estudar. Her question, she doesn't need to be called on. She says, if you were to open a new venture nowadays, what would you explore? What would you take a look at?
Oh, I think the whole world is going digital, and I'm not an expert in digital things, but I think that's the world is going in general, and I would certainly explore something to do in the digital world and maybe combine it with education, which I think is, there's lots of opportunities in education to do better things through the digital world. And I think I would explore something in that area because I think that is something, the direction things are going, and that is something which would be very valid for the country, for Brazil.
Well, we could sure use it globally, even outside of Brazil, having the resources and imagination still coming into education, where we still tend to be back a little bit in an earlier era when it comes to new ways of teaching and learning. Michael,
I'm a backer of the Khan Academy in the U.S.
oh, incredible.
And we brought the Khan Academy to Brazil, and we have 6 million people in Brazil using the Khan Academy. So, you know, that's, I think, the right direction.
Yes, that he should be a Nobel Prize winner. It's incredible the contributions that they've made through that very generous frontier of learning. Michael Connor, did you want to comment on the competitive edge, or are you too embarrassed to tell us the confessional statement you put online in the chat, Mike? Okay, I'm going to read you what Mike said. He's not censoring me. I'm competitive too, but sometimes I get stalled by the compulsion to do it perfectly and delay making a decision. Was it ever in your experience that you would get caught in the desire to be a perfectionist yourself that held you back?
Not really. You know, I just sort of trusted my basic feeling and moved ahead. I was never one to do all sorts of spreadsheets to look at if a decision made sense or not made sense. I like getting the data and getting a feeling, but in the end, I trust my gut feeling to a certain extent and try to move ahead. If you think too much and nothing gets done, and things don't move ahead. So you have to act.
Oh, well, that's great to hear. And I don't like wants a rebuttal as a follow-up, but Dennis Meisen, one of our past World Fellows, Dennis, you had this private foundation, in fact, established by Jorge Paulo Lemann. Could you explain what you do and how Yale didn't derail your career and your collaboration with Jorge, if in fact you're still on with us, Dennis?
Let me tell you who Dennis is first. Dennis is the guy who runs my foundation, and he is a socialist trying to make me spend all my money. Okay, go ahead, Dennis.
Yes, Dennis, welcome back to Yale, Dennis.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I think Jorge Paulo summed it up. I'm just trying to make him poor. You know, it's a tough fight. I have a lot of work to do. He has much more people on the other side, so it's unfair, but that's fine. I have the Yale training to help me. So I have been the pleasure of being leading the Lemann Foundation for the past 10 years, and I think Jorge Paulo explained kind of what we're trying to do. We're trying to help Brazil be a more fair and developed country through education, through betting in people. The collaboration with Yale and other top universities in the U.S. is critical in the scholarships that Jorge Paulo mentioned. We are training this new generation of Brazilians who are willing to tackle Brazil's most pressing social issues. And we are supporting large-scale reform of our education system to ensure that every Brazilian has a great education. And it's, as you can see from the call, we learn a lot every day, I think, from Jorge Paulo's vision and experience, and of course, generosity and the way he pushes everyone to be thinking how we can do better and how the country can do better. And that's what we're trying to do. And it's a pleasure to be participating here. And the more connected with Yale, the better. It was a wonderful experience I had there.
Dennis, did you recognize this guy at all, by the way? This is what's happened to Barry Naubuff at a later stage of life. If you're just wondering to know how he appears.
I'm trying to get the Dennis haircut look.
So,
Yeah, I try not to change much. That's why I don't have hair, because that's the best way that people don't see that you're changing. Barry was the best professor at the Yale experience, so it's always a pleasure to see him. And if you're students and you have a chance to have Barry as a professor, you should take it.
oh gosh,
You're too kind. Thank you, my friend.
can't beat that endorsement. But thank you for Barry. Eduardo, I was wondering if we could have a final question from you. I know we're just about at the end of our request. But if you had a quick,
Of course.
thank you.
Hi,
As a fellow
hi,
Brazilian.
hi, Jorge. I'm also, yeah, I'm also a fellow Brazilian. Thank you for taking the time. I know that you mentioned the investment back in education, and I completely agree. I know a lot of kind of the challenges we have can also be solved through innovation. And I also had the privilege to meet both Mark and Lara, who were to try to solve that through venture capital. So I was wondering, from both you or Dennis, do you guys plan to channel some of that capital through venture capital to try to solve some of these problems from a different angle, I guess?
Dennis, you want to take that or should I take it?
It's a tough closer.
You take it.
Okay. We do. Lara and Mark, who he mentioned, are my children, and my daughter Lara runs a venture capital fund, a startup, and mostly investing in startups and like that. And yes, we do invest in venture capital and startups. And my son Mark's not so much. He's more in the sports area like that. But we believe in venture capital to get to help education. And I have a good experience in that area. I maybe going back 10 years now, I backed two young girls who wanted to set up a venture capital fund in the education area. And after setting up the fund, they decided they didn't want to run the fund. They wanted to run a school. So the money I gave them, they went out and they bought a school. And that school at that point had six schools. And 10 years later, they're called Eleva, if somebody can identify them, ELEVA. And now they have over 90,000 students in Brazil and over 50 schools in Brazil. And some of these schools are for the Brazilian middle class, where, in other words, where you can, for a cheap sum, you can get a relatively good education. And they also have 4 schools which are bilingual schools, and, you know, all the most modern things possible in a school they have there. So it was a very satisfying experience. Financially, it was very good. They talk about doing an IPO someday or like that, but it's been a big success financially. And I think the thing I get the most people calling me throughout the year is people wanting to attend one of their bilingual schools and not being able to get in. It's harder to get in there than to one of the Ivy League universities. So I have all these people calling me, begging to get their children in and like that. So it's very successful. And so it's been very nice, profitable investment. It's helped Brazil, and and they keep growing and getting bigger. So I believe in venture capital for education very much.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Jeff. You're on mute. You're muted, Jeff.
Eduardo, really extra credit to you. We couldn't have had a better closing question than that one. You brought us to a win-win-win. And I want to say that we've had
thank you, Professor.
Oh, well, thank you. But of course, all the questions have been terrific. But even better than the questions have been the responses. What the generosity of what Jorge has given us is not one of these generic prepared speeches that some staffer has given an accomplished leader to read to us, or somebody who's trying to give us theoretical high water ground to kind of emulate a scholar, which which could even be worse than some of my scholar friends when they do it, is instead talking about the richness of your own experience and the brilliance of your own decision-making is remarkable. Both the candor and the inspiring successes, but also you took us to the rare ground of talking about setbacks and adversity. I wrote a book on this called Firing Back. It has to do with when great leaders rebound. And frankly, there is a great anthropologist that I drew on here, Joseph Campbell, who wrote a book called Hero of a Thousand Faces. And he said in this age of postmodernism and cultural relativism, we don't judge cultures on hierarchies and things anymore, except there's a cultural universal that has to do with the monomyth of the hero, the notion of adversity and learning from failure, that it isn't just that we're on a conveyor belt in life, but in fact, our resilience from setback. As Nietzsche says, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger. And you're the perfect representation. And I can't thank you enough for your time and for your candor. And we know these are very rare appearances that you make, and Yale and our students, we're all so thrilled you spent this time with us, Jorge. And thank you, students. I'm sorry if anybody's late for class, it's 100% my fault. And I want to thank all the clubs for their support as well. Thank you very much, of course, for the Association of Hispanic Latin American Students and of course, the Macmillan Center and everybody else who's joined us on this discussion today. Thanks.
Thank you. And I hope you all do well. I hope you benefit somehow from whatever I said. And it's been a pleasure to be with all of you, and I wish you much success.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Your generosity and wisdom.